Hey adventurers, so today's going to be another book review. This is going to be for The Wizard by Gene Wolfe. This is the second part in the duology, the Wizard Knight duology. This is, just like the first book, high fantasy, mythology, a little bit of kind of almost portal fantasy, but we're not really, it's really not. There's also a fair bit more, you could say, Arthuriana in this book, and so I'm going to include that as one of the genres or keywords or whatever that you want to put with it. Yeah, so let's get into this. The Wizard is the second book in the Wizard Knight duology by Gene Wolfe, which I just mentioned. This book picks up to our perception pretty much immediately after the events of the night. It seems to be, from what I'm seeing on the internet, it seems to be about a week after. I didn't remember that being the case. I thought it was just a few moments afterwards, but I probably am wrong. So it seems to it takes place relatively shortly after the events of the night, which is book one. And so while we and all our characters on Mythgarther are viewing the world as linearly as can be, Sir Abel has lived and trained and fought another 20 years in that time, during that time. Immediately, we see that there is a difference in our Sir Abel of the High Heart, though we have yet to truly discover exactly what that is or why. Before I continue on into this review, I just quickly like to say welcome to an Erudite adventure. I am T. If you're liking what you're seeing from us, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let's keep going here. So the Knight and the Wizard are, yes, a duology, but also really only one story. Like there is technically a beginning, middle, and an end for each of the books, but it's far more of like we get to a stopping point, a pausing point, and then we move on. As I already mentioned, there's really no time jump between the two books, and because of that, the story is completely a continuation, as if there was only enough time to pause to take a breath, really. But as we move into the second book, we see that there have been changes. Sir Abel is truly no longer a boy. He is now the knight he has been striving to be, and has been growing towards all of book one. His arc was fulfilled kind of at the end of book one with him facing the dragon. All the decisions he needed to make, he made, which then allows us to not feel as if we've missed out on those 20 years of his journey, because they were only making him more of the man he had already become by the end of book one. To no surprise, this is a book where we begin to understand how the world works. We already know about going down into Alphrecia. Is that possibly close to the correct pronunciation? I don't know. But in this book, we begin to comprehend the metaphysics and how they actually work. We learn why Uri and Baki, who are elves who hold great power, would obey somebody like Abel or even Tog, maybe? He chose some weird names for these characters, ones that I am not sufficiently knowledgeable of how to pronounce. So we're just going to go with that. We learn about the hierarchy of the universe. As this was being revealed and my understanding began to grow, I, as is often the case, became fascinated by Wolfe's world building and metaphysics. As I start to learn more about a world and the metaphysics of it, I become more and more interested in that aspect of the world. That which I was unsure about, my feelings on from book one, became something that I actually understood and that I was a little bit better with, that I actually enjoyed a little bit more. With all that, this is a very action-heavy book. As I implied, Sir Abel is much more powerful in this second book, but with that comes a responsibility and promise not to use that power. The second book is titled The Wizard, and so we assume that we are following a wizard or something, and that is the case. Abel is absolutely a wizard in this book. He just doesn't use that power. He has basically promised not to use that power, and even still, he's going around acting as a knight. He acts as merely a knight and fights and wins battles through skill and strength of arm rather than any magical abilities he might have, or also wit. Sometimes he uses his brain. He thinks about things a little bit as well. But it's not, he doesn't resort to his magical abilities, really. There are battles with giants, reunions with old friends, more travels through the world's mythology, Arthurian references, and so much more, all of it building into a wonderful story. This book, while not directly Arthuriana, fulfills that role in a lot of ways. For one, there are a ton of references to the Arthurian myths, with Arthur figures, references to the Green Knight, Mordred, and Morgana, and Excalibur, and just so much more that is the pieces of Arthurian literature, Arthurian myth, but also in terms of themes and character archetypes and character arcs even that directly resemble, reflect, and reference that myth, the Arthurian myth. It is that aspect so much clearer and more obvious in The Wizard that lifted my enjoyment of the book in the moment of reading. I mentioned, when did I mention this? It was either in my wrap up for my wrap up for my December wrap up when I talked about this, or in my Adventure Through an Arthurian Lit Part 3 video where I talk about this book and how it is Arthurian a little bit. And in those is when I was talking about how I enjoyed part 2 better because of the Arthurian references. Looking back now, I'm not entirely sure which of the two parts is my favorite, whether the Knight or the Wizard. There's a lot that I really enjoyed in both of them. I am still leaning towards the Wizard for a lot of reasons, partly for that Arthurian aspect. The writing style as well. I believe I mentioned this in my review of the Knight, which I filmed just a couple weeks ago, and it'll be a while before you see either of these videos from the time that I'm filming, but then it'll be a while between when you see the Knight and then when you see the Wizard reviews. So just know that I talked about this. I'm pretty sure I talked about this in my review of the Knight, and it still applies here. Wolfe is one of the most atmospheric writers I've read. Not in the sense of every detail being described in flowery language designed to invoke a specific mental image, but rather he provides a space where we can allow our imagination to run wild and view the story through the lens of our own experiences and knowledge and understanding. There are many moments, scenes, and sequences that my mind looks back on and latches to, even when the context has already faded from my mind. But with that, I'm able to remember my experience of the story much stronger than books where the story itself remains clear in my mind. Overall, I found this to just be an excellent book, as well as duology, one of my favorites that I've read in a very long time. I know with certainty that I don't understand everything that Wolfe was doing or saying with this book. I know for a fact that he has layers upon layers of meaning to what he's writing, and I'm not studying that, I'm not worrying about that. What is clear enough to me is that the story itself, and if you just read the story as it appears to you, is a fantastic story. And just from a purely storytelling basis, The Wizard Knight is an incredible piece of storytelling. There's so much more that there really is so much more that I could say about the book. I didn't talk about very much about the characters or the events or the themes or anything like that beyond Sir Abel specifically, because it is kind of his story. But things like Togue and the crew that he has, Uri and Baki and the wolf, or the dog and the cat and the troll and the hunchback, and just all the different characters and that he comes across, Garsek and everything. All these characters are very important characters to the book with important storylines that happen. I didn't even really talk about the storylines that happen either, and there's so much that could be said about this book. But what I'm going for with these reviews, it really isn't necessary for me to talk about those things. I mentioned recently I did a video on, by the time you're seeing this, it's several probably months back now, but I did a video on why I do reviews, why I still review books. And one of the things that I was talking about is the way that I choose to review books, which is far more experiential. This is my experience with the book rather than analytical, where I'm looking at the book analytically, trying to understand the construction of it. That I should probably do more of that than I do, and as a reader I do more of that, but as a reviewer I just look more at my experience of the book, and because of that I don't feel the need to dive into the character journeys or the storylines themselves or anything like that, and I'm looking more at my experience with the book. And my experience with this book was fantastic. Part of that has to do with, well, it's a relatively easy read for how complex it is. It's easy to read, like you can sit down and read a decent amount of pages in a shorter period of time. But also part of that is due to having read it with Liam and Shannon and Britton, and was able to talk to them as we were reading and stuff like that. And then I did the Wizard physically, and I did the Knight on audio. which actually was really nice because I got to hear some of the names and how they were actually supposed to be pronounced and stuff like that, or how the narrator just chose to pronounce them, whatever it might be. But it allowed me to get through the story, and that's probably also why I say I enjoy The Wizard more than The Knight, is because I had it in a more condensed timeline, because the Knight took me a month and a half, 2 months or something to read through, just because I didn't have very much time to physically read. But The Wizard I was able to listen to in a matter of days, and so I had the entirety of the story compressed into a shorter period of time, and was remembering things a little bit better. And so maybe that helped a little bit with my overall enjoyment of the story. Who knows? That's neither here nor there. But what's important is that I experienced the story in a lot of different ways, because I was experiencing it with these guys, I was experiencing it through physically reading and then audio reading and everything. And overall, this is an excellent book. I enjoyed it so much. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. There's absolutely people that I would say, you probably shouldn't read this one. This one probably you won't like. It's probably not a good one for you to read, whatever it might be. But I found it to be excellent. I had so much fun with it, and just a fantastic duology, fantastic novel. So anyways, that is my review for The Wizard by Gene Wolfe. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and have our social medias linked in the description down below. We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.